Long years ago, we made a trip with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge.
8 नवंबर 2016 की रात्रि को 12 बजे से
चीफ मिनिस्टर के लिए मेरा एक ही संदेश है कि वो राजधर्म का पालन करें।
हार्डवेयर वालों की सोच क्या होती है, हार्ड वर्क वालों की सोच क्या होती है।
अरे ये ना पंजाब की खुशबू।
I'm watching the barge creak across a slate grey channel toward a place called the Trash Island. Its cargo is a single rusted cage, rattling with each wave. Inside, a wiry black and white dog pants, in confusion, nails scraping the metal floor. The gate clanks open and he stepped out, not onto grass or shelter, but into a dune of twisted rebar and rotting sacks. The air hums with flies. A few other dogs pad over, their ribs like the slats of broken umbrellas. This is a scene from Wes Anderson's movie Isle of Dogs. It's framed in Nagasaki City as part of the decisive leadership of the mayor, his decree to protect the human population from disease by banishing dogs to this island, the Trash Island. And beneath Anderson's pastel symmetry is a story that perhaps will resonate with some of you who are here listening to this video essay. For in India's Nagasaki, Delhi 2025, here where the air is thick with the tang of exhaust, underscored by the sour note of rotten food. The AQI, I am told, has been managed well to not reveal the truth that the eyes see or the nose smells. Streets squeezed beneath the movement of a million strays, ears pricked, tails flicking, eyes scanning for scraps among overflowing garbage. It is the inevitable culmination of decades in which sterilization programs limped along, waste management dissolved into chaos, and the city's entire network of municipal shelters could have been counted quite literally on one's fingers. The outcome is both predictable and grim. A steady increase in the number of dog bites, shadow of rabies, headlines baited with panic. The Delhi dog problem might not be too dissimilar from the Delhi human problem after all. We live in a world where a social media channel, Ghar Ki Kalesh, rakes in millions of views, but perhaps there is no correlation. Now, into this tangled ecosystem, draped in the moral certitude of action for action's sake, strides the Supreme Court of India. Their directive is almost cinematic in its simplicity. Not too different from the bombastic directives we have been used to in Modi era. Remove every stray from the streets, corral them into vast new shelters, vaccinate and sterilize them, and keep them from public roads forever. It sounds, at first hearing, like the overture to an uplifting montage. Except, there is not even a trash island waiting. No pre-existing kennels. The shelters exist only on paper. The budget in the realm of vapor. In public, the justification is tidy. Stray dogs spread rabies. They bite children. It is the kind of explanation that collapses a complex social ecology into a single, irresistible image. The injured child, the frightened parent, the state stepping in to protect. But such images work like political shorthand. They erase as much as they illuminate. There's a term in popular internet discourse, created from a corner of the internet, a modern tweet from 2020 that observed how every heartwarming human interest story in America seemed to involve a man raising $20,000 to prevent orphans from being crushed by an orphan crushing machine, without ever questioning why such a machine existed in the first place. In Delhi, the orphan crushing machine metaphor is canine. The court is asking us to cheer the relocation of dogs from open streets to hidden overcrowding without dismantling the conveyor belt of garbage, reproduction, and municipal indifference that will produce the next million. And you can, rightfully, and in fact perhaps with more moral conviction than me, ask why do you care about this as much? But please understand this. This is exactly also how the government deals with any of its other problems. Remember how the slums of Ahmedabad were draped and hidden when the Chinese premier had visited the city to hug our Superman. Remember how they would fudge data, lie to us, and use their propaganda mouthpieces to cover up behind them. This here is another symptom of that same problem. So let me pause here and acknowledge that in India, teeming with poverty, hunger, and malnourishment, perhaps we have bigger problem, and perhaps one should acknowledge their own privilege when they decide to speak on such a subject. And trust me, I do. Having said that, there is one truth that we would rather not acknowledge, because the truth is, India can afford to do far more than it claims. The sums spent on vanity infrastructure, statues to the dead, bridges that crumble within their warranty, the ceaseless whirl of prime ministerial tours. These could in theory finance a nationwide program of canine vaccination many times over, while also aiding the millions in our country who need help. In a country where the government has mastered the art of megaphone, the propaganda machine could easily be repurposed into a public health instrument. A sustained campaign for sterilization, vaccination, and responsible pet care that could in time drain the reservoir of rabies at its source. There is also a moral inversion here that goes largely unexamined. A dog that lunges at a child is rarely born vicious. It is made so, shaped by stones thrown, kicks landed, food withheld. In that sense, stray dogs are not an alien species among us. They are mirrors. The brutality in their behavior is often the echo of our own, just as their resilience and loyalty, when found, are an echo of care. The scarcity of shelters only sharpens the contradiction. Those that do exist, as friends in animal welfare tell me, operate at the very edge of their capacity, with no structural support from the state. The Supreme Court, if it were serious about changing the conditions rather than the optics, could begin by ordering an honest reckoning. How many shelters are needed? How much would they cost? How might they be staffed, supplied, and sustained? Even such an inquiry, dry, procedural, would be more than symbolic theatre. It would be the architecture of some kind of a solution. And if one was willing to think beyond containment, there is an opportunity hiding in plain sight. Ours is a generation described by sociologists as uniquely lonely. Less sexually active, less community-rooted, more prone to depression than those before it. In such a landscape, animal companionship is perhaps not as much a sentimental luxury, but a form of social infrastructure. Imagine if strays were taken into well-run shelters, cleaned, sterilized, vaccinated, and then adopted into homes, not merely as rescues, but as antidotes to isolation. The state has done this before. There was a time when every Bollywood star worth their screen time pleaded with public to vaccinate against polio. Why not a similar campaign for adoption, for therapy, for companionship? An appeal to adopt a dog as one might adopt a fragment of hope. But even if such visions are dismissed as idealism, the court could still have grounded its order in the Constitution itself. Article 21, the right to life, has already been interpreted in the Jallikattu judgment as encompassing dignity, not merely survival. There is legal precedent for recognizing that this dignity extends beyond humans to the animals in our charge. To speak this aloud from the bench would not have solved the problem overnight, but it would have placed the stray dog question within the moral vocabulary of the Republic, where it belongs. It is tempting to view this as mere hypocrisy or incompetence, but that lets the deeper logic off the hook. The spectacle of decisive action is itself the point. In a political culture where optics often trump outcome, the act of ordering mass relocation satisfies an ancient script. The ruler commands, the problem disappears from sight. Applause follows. Roman emperors staged grain distributions in the Colosseum not because they solved famine, but because the act of distribution was visible, memorable, and most importantly public. In the same way, Delhi's ruling does not aim to cure rabies or reduce the stray population at its root. It aims to be seen curing it. Animal welfare groups are right to point out that the city lacks even 1% of the shelter capacity required, and that without addressing sterilization, vaccination, and waste management, the problem will simply reappear. But such reminders disrupt the narrative arc. They refuse to stay within the genre of the quick rescue, the uplifting decree, the noble leader saving the vulnerable. They point instead to the grinding, unglamorous work of dismantling the machine, which is, politically speaking, the least photogenic labor there is. The dogs in this case are both victims and mirrors, their fates reflecting the larger incapacity of our system to distinguish between erasure and resolution, between hiding a problem and solving it. In Isle of Dogs, the children eventually overthrow the mayor's edict, bringing the animals back into the city. But even in that act of return, Anderson's film leaves an unanswered question, hovering in the frame. What about the trash? Who will clean it, and for how long before the island fills again? Unlike Wes Anderson's movies, Delhi's story may not have a symmetrical set design or a swelling score, but it shares that same lingering question. When the court's deadline passes and the shelters, overcrowded and underfunded, begin to strain, will the city finally turn to the root? Garbage management, sterilization, public health investment? Or will it build another island, another exile, another way to pause the machine without ever dismantling it? And in that pause, in the space between applause and aftermath, how many more orphans will the machine quietly prepare? In the end, if all of what I just said to you does not make logical sense, and there exist, in your head, many thousand more bigger problems that need be solving, do that. And perhaps consider this video essay just a movie recommendation. Watch the film if you can.